Hello and welcome back to the Cosmic Bridge podcast with me, Michael Hanson, the founder of Growth Genie. Typically, we do interviews on the Cosmic Bridge, but today is going to be a little bit of a different show. I'm going to be talking about a graphic. Now, I know a lot of you listen to the audio on Spotify, Apple, or whatever your podcast platform is. So what I'd like you to do if you're doing that is in the show notes, we're going to leave the diagram that I'm going through. And essentially, if any of you have seen Ikigai, which is actually a podcast we did with Jeremy Connell-Waite, but essentially it's this Japanese concept of finding your vocation of something that is something you love doing, something you can get paid for, something you're passionate about. So people may have seen this kind of Venn diagram mandala, but we've created our own ones, which we're going to be talking about on the Cosmic Bridge over the next few weeks. So I'm going to get into it and talk about it now. Right, so essentially a big theme of the show of the Cosmic Bridge is balance. We've had lots of topics of different types of balance. Sometimes we've talked about family and work. Sometimes people are workaholics and they're not spending enough time in their family. That results in divorces. We've had several instances of that. And just generally, I think really everything's about balance in life. And so we've also talked on the show before of in the Western world, we often look at things as very linear, but often things work as circular. A big example I like to give is with your parents, right? So if you have a close relationship, not everyone's lucky enough to have a close relationship with their parents, but I do have a very close relationship with my parents. And one of the things I noticed is they obviously looked after me, cared for me incredibly, and I'm very grateful for that. But as they get older, I'm having to look after them more, right? And it's that weird thing of life is a circle, the circle of life, and that when you're young, your parents are looking after you, but when they're old, you're looking after them, right? So that's an example of kind of this circle of life and the balance of life. But I'm not be talking about family today. As you can see on this graphic, I'm actually going to be talking about sales. So one of the other themes that comes up on the show is this balance between the spiritual and material, right? We live in a capitalist society, so we need to make money, but we don't want to sell our souls to the devil. We don't want to make money at the expense of something that's not good for society. And that's where the spiritual comes in. So this is a theme that's come up. The reason I wanted to kick off with sales is something I know a lot about. For those of you who don't know much about me, I run a sales training and sales consulting company called Growth Genie. So during my career, I've trained thousands of salespeople. And I think what's going to be unique of this is this spiritual aspect here. Because when you think of sales, you don't think of spirituality, right? A lot of people have this negative image of salespeople, this sleazy salesperson that's just conning someone into commission. But actually what I've found is the salespeople that are really successful, who are doing enterprise deals, selling deals worth millions of pounds or dollars or whatever your currency is, actually they do have a bit of a spiritual aspect to it because they're thinking very long term. They're not thinking of a quick transactional sale. They're thinking, I need to really have a strong connection with this person, that they trust me, and they're not just going to buy from me once. They're going to really like whatever I'm selling, and they're going to come back to me over and over again. And there's a fit there that this product is really the right thing for them, right? So I'm going to be talking about this balance between material and spiritual, and then quality and quantity I will come on to as well. So let's start with this spiritual aspect here. So if you imagine you're selling to someone who is a manager, right? Let's just say it's a marketing manager. Let's imagine I'm a marketing agency or I'm selling some type of marketing technology. Then obviously there's a material aspect, right? I want the marketing that I'm doing to result in money, profit for the company, even other measurable things like number of marketing leads or traffic, number of people that's going to the website. But beyond that, you also want to have a spiritual impact or look at the spiritual challenges, right? So a big example I give, if you're selling to marketers, often marketers aren't treated very well by salespeople, and salespeople just say, oh, marketing, they just make this rubbish content, fluffy PowerPoints. They don't actually do anything. We're the people that do the hard stuff here, right? And obviously that's not always the case, but that's often about perception. So that's kind of having a damaging effect on the spirit, the morale of the team. Another spiritual thing you can look at is if you're a manager and you have great people, let's imagine you have a marketing manager, you've got great graphic designers, content writers, etc. You want them to be happy spiritually because you don't want them to go to another company, right? So if you've got a technology that's tapping in or any type of product that is tapping into the well-being, right? So that's another thing, is often if you're managing a team, you're interested in the well-being of them, not just because you want to look after your team, but there's also an economic impact. If your best people go and they're making money for the company, there's also an economic impact. So that's the material aspect here. And then I think what happens here, so you can see this bit connection that I've put here, right? So this is really important in sales, is you're connecting with other people. And the thing I say is you don't necessarily need to be liked in sales, but you do need to be respected. So how can you be respected? I think one of the things is honesty and transparency. And this kind of comes into the spirituality piece as well. And I'll put my hands up and say, I've been that person in the past where I've not been totally transparent as a salesperson, but you always be found out in the end. Because if you sell a product that's not quite right, eventually the customer service team later down the line, they're the ones that are going to have the negative effect there. So honesty, transparency is what I found is really important in sales. And going back to what I said before, if you're lying, even small lies, and something doesn't go right, that person's going to lose respect for you, and they're not going to come back and do business with you later. Because that's what's happened in my career. I've made really good relationships with people, and they've come and bought with me time and time again, because I've been doing sales and marketing in my past 3 companies. So people that I worked with 6 years ago come back to me now and ask for sales training because I've got that relationship. And on the opposite spectrum, people I've burned bridges with are not coming back to me. So you should always be looking at things in a long-term game, not just in the short term. So that's a bit of the connection here. And here you can see the quality piece, and this goes into the quality, which is if you want to sell these big enterprise deals, right? It's not just the material, it's that spiritual connection, because there's got to be a really big impact upon the company. So it's like I was saying, what I find is people who are looking long term, because typically an enterprise deal, so when I say enterprise, I mean you're selling to a big company, that could take a year, sometimes 2, 3, 4 years, depending on what you're selling. So these things can take a long time. And people who are, obviously, if you're in enterprise sales, you're looking at things very long term, and you're looking at really what's the best deal for the person here, right? We then come on to the qualification part. So essentially a big mistake a lot of salespeople make is they spend a lot of time with, there's this term we have in sales called tire kickers. And what it is where people are spending time with people that aren't going to buy, right? And this is a classic salesperson. And this goes into actually a spiritual concept here of like detachment, which is big in, Hinduism and Buddhism. But essentially salespeople become very attached, right, to a deal. It's a bit like dating. It's like, it's very repulsive if you're dating someone and they're very clingy. They want to spend all of their time with you, right? Like, oh, back off, right? I only just met you. And it's the same with sales, right? If someone is like too focused on the deal and like, I have to get this deal because otherwise I'm not a good salesperson, it comes off as desperate. And that's not saying you don't need to do the hard work, and we'll come onto this later. You want to put as much effort as possible into that deal, but you don't want to psychologically feel like I need that deal, right? I absolutely 100% need that deal. And that's why I have a thing called a pipeline in sales, where you've got multiple deals going on at the same time. So yeah, with qualification, I think one of the biggest things is detachment, right? So when you're looking at your deals, genuinely think, is this person the right fit? Are they interested? Because if they're not, just put them to one side and move on to the next person, because time is money, obviously, in sales, going to the material. And if you're spending, sometimes you could spend 100 hours. I'm sure I've done that in the past with a deal that's not really qualified, and it's a waste of time. So you want to know very early on in your sale, is this person even qualified to buy? So that's kind of going on to the material. And then obviously with the material, I was talking about the spiritual things before, which are often things that can't be measured. With the material, you want that balance of, I always say, people buy from emotion typically, right? So they justify with logic, but they buy because of emotion. So you may have that spiritual connection, but they want to justify that decision based on logic. And that's where, if there's anything you can measure around your technology or product or whatever you're selling. So in my case, it's obvious, because sales, it's about like the revenue that can be made, right, from a company, or the ROI or conversion rates if you're in marketing. but whatever you're selling, there's always like metrics, numbers that you can attach to a deal. And if there's an accountant or a CFO, chief financial officer, that gets involved, that's obviously things they're going to be looking at. Now, on this side here of the quantity, this is a big problem that I've seen in the sales world. I think especially nowadays, a lot of people working from home and they have a lot of independence, which is great. But a lot of salespeople, they don't want to put in the work, right? And sales is a numbers game. And this is a really big thing, this balance of quality and quantity, because you don't want your messaging to be rubbish. You want it to be customized to every single person that you're reaching out to, because we've all got those rubbish emails, right? Which are, "Hi, hope you find this well." Big sales pitch, and then there's a load of rubbish there. So you don't want to just be sending the same message, same proposal to thousands of people. But sales is still a numbers game. Like I said, you're not going to close every single deal. You need to detach from some of them, so you need to put in the numbers. But what I found, and I think this is a growing trend, is activity is going down across salespeople. So it's still really important to put in the work. So you need to try and balance quality and quantity in sales. So the activity is really important. Even if you have the best messaging in the world, if you're only contacting a few companies, not everyone needs your product, right? So it's likely you're not going to win those deals. So you need to get more in your pipeline. And then finally on here, we've got discipline. So obviously these two things are interrelated. You've got to have the discipline to do the activity. But I think the reason I've put this in spiritual, I think from a personal perspective, this is key, is actually your will to want to do this. You should be asking, why are you working in the company at the moment that you're in, right? Like what makes you passionate about the company? And maybe you don't know. Maybe you're just like, oh, I'm just in this for a job. And what you should do is go and ask the CEO of the company, ask why did they set up the company? Because I think there's a real misconception of like people that found companies that they're just doing it to make money, whereas a lot of the time they have this big vision. So I always give the example of Steve Jobs when he made the iPhone. He wasn't, when he made the iPhone, thinking, I need to make loads of money off this product. At that point, he'd already made the Mac, like the computers, right? But he thought, I want every single person in the world to be connected at the click of a button through something that's portable and not heavy and they can put in their pockets, right? So that was his vision. And then he worked to make that reality, right? And imagine if you're an employee at Apple at the time and you ask Steve Jobs, what's your mission and vision? And he tells you this, maybe you start getting really excited about it. Maybe that's not for you, right? But maybe that is something that excites you, all those people being connected. So that's an example of, if you're not sure why you're working in the company, try and get that why, try and understand why. And it could be, I spoke to, there was a girl I was training recently, and she said to me that, her goal is eventually to open like an animal sanctuary. So she wants to make loads of money, but it's just not just money for the sake of it. So open that, and that's what drives her every day. And she's the top performer in her company. And on my level, for me, yes, having financial benefits is obviously great in a capitalist society, but I've never really been driven by money in sales. For me, it's always been the impact. And with the current job I'm doing at the moment, training salespeople, obviously when salespeople send me messages, I hit my target. I'm really grateful for the training coaching. Obviously, that's really makes you feel good spiritually, right? But on the other side of it, I really like what we do at Growth Genie, because sales is about communication. So one, becoming better at sales, it's helped me be a better communicator. And two, it's helped the people, my staff and all the people we train, become better communicators as well. And I've actually think it's had an impact on me with my family, with my friends. So for me, just becoming a better communicator every day through my job, I'm really grateful for that. And, there's wars. That First World War is an example that started because of miscommunication between countries. I think communication is such an important thing. So going back to the discipline element of this, if you have your why, it's going to give you that discipline. And then with the discipline side of things, it's like time management is really important, right? So it's thinking, if you say at the start of the day, I'm going to send 50 emails, that you just do the 50 emails no matter what. Even if you get to the end of the day, technically you're meant to work till 5 o'clock and you've done 35 emails, do an extra hour to get those emails done, because that's really important. Because as I said, the quantity and the quality, you've got to have these two things combined. You've got to continuously try to better messaging, better connection with your buyers, but you've also got to be disciplined to do the work And the final thing is these two things are totally interrelated, because actually the more work that you do, the more you're going to improve, right? It's like anything. It's like football, right? Or every footballer practices every single day, and they were practicing every single day of their lives when they were kids, right? So discipline and the quantity, that's going to result in the quality. And from a sales aspect, the more customers that you speak to, the more you're understanding the customer's brain and how it works. So obviously that's going to help you. So something a little bit different here. Let me know what you thought of this, because our plan for the Cosmic Bridge is today we talked a little bit about the material, and which is obviously selling and getting money. Obviously, there's a spiritual aspect like we talked about here, but we're going to be talking about some different themes. We're going to be talking about, spirituality, the concept of time, which has come up a lot of times. So let us know what you think of this Venn diagram, mandala, a lot of different ways you could look at this and what it's called. Because we'd love to hear your feedback. And if you know anyone that works in sales, maybe is struggling, send them this. I also think this is not just for sales. I think it's for business and entrepreneurship. One of the most important aspects of being an entrepreneur is obviously selling, keeping your money afloat so you can pay your staff. So if you know anyone that's an entrepreneur or a salesperson, send them a link to the show. If you're listening to us on Apple, Spotify, give us a like and subscribe. And on YouTube, give us a comment. Let me know what you thought of the show. And we'll see you next week on the next episode of the Cosmic Bridge. Cheers.